Hi, everyone. I'm Daisy Auger-Dominguez. My pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I'm Chief People Officer at Vice Media Group. I am so pleased to join the Out and Equal community today. The great driving force of my career has been elevating the importance of inclusion, authenticity, and innovation in workplaces, helping others feel seen, valued, and understood because it has been part of my journey. Never has it been more critical for us to get the important work of diversity, equity, and inclusion right across all of our organizations. Despite progress being made to eradicate stigma, we know many LGBTQ professionals, women, and people of color still face numerous barriers in both accessing career opportunities and in the workplace itself. From plain employment bias and discrimination, outdated gender roles and language, to microaggressions and unconscious biases, many LGBTQ women and people of color still struggle to find adequate support, fair opportunities for growth, a sense of belonging, and psychological safety in their workplaces. And we know that transgender employees are also more likely to experience discrimination based on their LGBT status than cisgender LGB employees. In the early part of my career, as the only Latina and youngest person in most rooms, I often fell prey to what Kenji Yoshino has coined covering, the practice of downplaying who you are to survive in an organizational context. You simply can't perform at your best when you're constantly modifying or playing down who you are, including your appearance, your accents, your heritage, and who you love. Belonging means this is a place where I don't have to constantly calculate which parts of myself to bring forward and which parts to blend. I know that my whole truth matters. I can fail fast and recover quickly, and I am essential to the team. Today, I'm here to tell you that understanding how intersectionality, bias, and aggressions at work along the lines of race, gender, class, sexual orientation, and other characteristics impacts work experiences and outcomes. And taking action to address their impact is one of the most important ways you can nurture truly inclusive and equitable workplaces. Words matter. So let's talk about them. Intersectionality, as defined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, describes how race, class, gender, and other individual characteristics intersect with one another and overlap. It's not simply that there is a race problem here, a gender problem here, and a class, nationality, religion, or sexual orientation and gender identity problem over there. A person can be a woman who is queer, black, and disabled, for example. This may mean that she is experiencing compounding inequity and microaggressions, which are important to recognize and correct. Many times, the framework that you are only one or the other erases what happens to people who are subject to all of the things. The issue with focusing on only one or two groups is that you often negate someone's intersectional identities and don't make space for them to thrive in their fullest expression. We all want to feel valued, seen, and understood, to feel that sense of belonging, that feeling of connectedness within a group or community. Studies show that our brains crave belonging in the same way we crave food. And without it, other studies have shown we become depressed and disengaged. I know firsthand that it's possible for people to be hired at top companies, be part of leadership teams, be invited to meetings, and be asked to contribute, and still not feel that people like them belong there. We all want to be where we are supported and encouraged to grow. Instead, many of us, especially those holding varied intersectional identities, are tolerated, yet not accepted. We're put on display for optics, yet disempowered and silenced. That's why organizations need to invest in belonging at every level and chip away at systemic biases, inequities, and disparities. My husband, an artist and scientist, often reminds me that our minds are pattern makers. I like to remind him that means that they are also bias makers. We might all like to believe that we have a logical train of thought. However, the fact is that we are constantly under the influence of many cognitive biases developed over a lifetime. All humans have biases, conscious and unconscious, explicit and implicit. For example, when we first meet someone, it takes us about 7 seconds to form an instant opinion. Like that. How likable, competent, and trustworthy they are. It isn't fair, but it's reality. And it usually happens unconsciously. These biases introduce errors in the workplace in everything from how we hire, how we evaluate performance, and how we assign projects. Despite years of implicit bias training, there remains much work to be done to move beyond awareness of implicit or unconscious bias to intentional, inclusive behaviors and culture. To drive lasting change, it takes an open mind and a willingness to be aware of our biases, motivated to change, build a strategy for debiasing decision making, and be willing to shift to a different lens, looking at things not from our own perspective, but as others see and experience them. The urgency to shift the culture, processes, and practices that perpetuate persistent inequities across our organizations is clear, but the roadmap still looks rocky. I want to help you all build the will, skill, and courage to make change possible because change is possible. Part of creating workspaces that are inclusive and deliver a sense of belonging for all means first recognizing that everyone has a story that includes an intersection of identity, power, access, and opportunity, given their race, age, gender, religion, sexual orientation, disability, nationality, and so much more. And that continues to their experiences at work. It requires an understanding that inclusion starts with seeing beyond our own perspective and through the lens of others. When I launched my career at Moody's Investor Service, my father gave me this advice: Mija, my daughter, keep your head down and work harder than everyone else. And I would soon learn that wouldn't be enough. I soon experienced the insidious effects of everyday sexism and racism in the workplace. I learned quickly that in order to survive in meetings with my bosses and team members and in hallway conversations, I needed to put on an emotional armor. Why? Because all around me, talented women, people of color, and LGBTQ colleagues were being quietly sidelined and marginalized. I gravitated towards my Black and Brown and LGBTQ colleagues because it felt easy and welcoming. In the safety of our circles, we would whisper the subtle slights and microaggressions of the day. Like how many times I was confused for the only other Latina in the department, or how many times I was told in a tone of disbelief that I spoke English so well. We were exhausted, not from our work, but from the intellectual and emotional labor of constantly battling racism and white standards of professionalism, or having to navigate spaces not built with us in mind, while those who marginalized, excluded, or held back our progress continued to be rewarded. This sadly remains a persistent experience in the workplace. Addressing intersectional biases faced across the employee life journey, from recruitment to advancement and promotion, can help us design the right solutions and the right path forward. Over the years, I have tested and developed different models for dismantling inequities across many organizations, industries, and geographies. I have seen what works and what doesn't. I've learned that best practices and research are good starting points, but there are no silver bullets or shortcuts. You have to start somewhere. Here's my formula: reflect, visualize, act, and persist. This is a model I introduce in my new book, Inclusion Revolution. And it's a model that I believe you can use as you tackle any challenge. Reflect to help you get clear on what you and others experience, how you experience work, the structural causes or root causes of your underrepresentation or toxic workplace culture. Visualize what could be possible for you and your organization. In corporate speak, this is where you build your strategic roadmap. Act on what you have heard and learned. This is when you test out your theories and hypotheses. Try it out, iterate, do it again. And persist when obstacles appear, because they will. They show up in the form of resistance, they show up in the form of slashed budgets, they show up in many forms. The point is, they show up and you can build your courage reservoirs to move past them. Let's start with reflect, or as I also like to call it, holding up a mirror. Understanding how deep bias runs in your workplace starts with you recognizing your own blind spots and assumptions. Ask yourself, what motivates me to build a diverse workforce and inclusive culture? What events or people in the past have made me who I am today? What beliefs have I given up on? Which do I hold on to? What makes me nervous, fearful, or confused about this work? What is one thing I could be doing better to prioritize equity in my behaviors, my interpersonal relationships, and my decision making? I want to share a framework created by Dr. Defina Lazarus Stewart that has helped me understand how the terms we use fundamentally ask different questions and are concerned with fundamentally different but interrelated issues that, when acted on, can drive real change. Diversity asks, who is in the room? Equity asks, who is trying to get in the room but can't? Inclusion asks, have everyone's ideas been heard? Equity responds, whose ideas won't be taken as seriously because they're not in the majority? Diversity asks, how many more pick your choice of underrepresented group do we have this year? Equity responds, what conditions have we created that maintain certain groups as the perpetual majority here? Inclusion asks, how do we bring others to the table? Equity asks, whose safety is being sacrificed and minimized to allow others to be comfortable maintaining dehumanizing views? If we took the time to answer these questions, look in the mirror as we reckon with our answers, and share what we learn with others, we may be able to build bridges instead of further isolating ourselves from each other. Here's the thing about looking in the mirror: it fundamentally requires you and others to recognize your personal, cultural, and systemic sore spots. It requires a deeper diagnosis of the routine practices that drive the outcomes we say that we want to achieve. Now, once you've collected this information, it's time to visualize, to set your inclusion ambitions and build out your toolkit, including how you intend to measure and implement practices and initiatives. I told you, this is your strategic roadmap. There is no right way to do this. You do not have to run a unit or group or a company to have an impact on its culture and practices. Even if your team is just you and two other folks, you can improve your microculture by focusing on listening, communication, and connection. And all organizations are nothing but a reaggregation of the microcultures within it. So why not drive your company culture by upgrading the culture you have an influence on? every one of us needs to look at ourselves and ask, what role do I want to play? Am I willing to address challenges I've uncovered? The questions you ask and the answers you seek across the organization are right in front of you. What is the demographic makeup of our employees? Where do we have overrepresentation and underrepresentation, particularly when it comes to historically marginalized identities such as race and gender and LGBTQ status? Do employees perceive they are accepted and respected by colleagues? Do employees perceive their ideas are heard and acted upon? Do employees feel they are adequately compensated for their labor? Do our production and marketing processes evaluate the environmental and social impacts of our products and services? What role have I played in these outcomes? Well educated, well intentioned, and even open minded people often move along their lives severely underestimating the impact of their racialized actions and privileges. And this plays out in the professional lives of marginalized women and people of color. I'd like to underscore here that we can all remove barriers and clear the advancement path for all. Anyone who wants to become allies can build or rebuild relationships with LGBTQ, people of color, or other historically excluded employees by asking better questions. Seek to understand by asking, do you feel safe, comfortable, and respected? What do you feel are the biggest barriers to your success? And perhaps most importantly, how can I help you overcome them? I define allyship as being willing to sacrifice your own comfort for the comfort of others. Asking these questions is how it starts. As a cisgendered, heterosexual woman, I haven't always gotten it right, but I lean on the advice of those I work with and my friends and colleagues who help me put up a mirror when I need to be and do better for my LGBTQ colleagues. And you can too. Now, awareness means nothing if you don't act. Sitting in awareness is not enough. You can change the practices, policies, behaviors, and decisions that advantage the majority and disadvantage historically excluded employees in respect of jobs, work assignments, promotions, compensation, and engagement at your organization. The most effective way to change outcomes and to reduce persistent biases that close the door on people's ambitions, innovation, and potential is to prioritize equity in every people decision. Here are a few examples of how leaders, especially people managers, can disrupt bias in employee processes. Biases that close the door on so much amazing talent and where we can all contribute to change. Let's start with recruiting. Start by digging into your workforce data with a lens on representation, on an intersectional lens. What does that data tell you? Where are the gaps and opportunities, not just across race, but also across gender, LGBTQ status, age, all of your identity dimensions? Establish ambitious goals. Yes, goals to close representation gaps. Targets for recruiters to source underrepresented talent and hold everyone in the process accountable. Most importantly, you. Screen for bias in the hiring process. Rewrite your job descriptions. Review selection criteria to ensure they are essential for the job and are not biased towards any identity group. And ensure you have interview panels that are diverse. Standardize how you debrief the information you gather from those panels and how you decide on final candidates. Now let's talk about development and advancement barriers. Calibrate performance reviews to check for bias. According to the Harvard Business Review, more than half of a performance rating reflects the rater's own characteristics, not those of the person being rated. Yep, better start thinking about how to change that. Define clear paths for advancement that intentionally identify high potential women and other underrepresented talent as successors in talent reviews. Provide an endorsement and support system for underrepresented talent, including high profile assignments, mentoring, sponsorship, and development plans. Support can come in the form of making introductions, celebrating others' achievements, lending an ear, asking tough questions, or calling out acts of deliberate or unconscious bias and aggressions. Endorsing someone looks like this. Look, I want you to meet Maria. Maria is amazing. Give her insight into the culture. Help her navigate through the unspoken rules. I'm about to give her a stretch role. She could benefit from your help and support along the way. Now let's talk about engagement. There's nothing like picking up the phone. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. Call team members to say hello, check in, and catch up, especially those that you don't interact with on a regular basis. The calls don't need to be long. Their power comes from authenticity. Create a space in team settings with inclusive norms. For example, a round robin approach can give each team member equal time to contribute to the discussion at hand. The active use of chat and video conferences can help draw out reactions, analysis, and solutions from all team members, including the quieter ones. You want to watch to make sure that you're not always listening to the loudest voices. Remember, it takes time to create these norms, and figuring out what works may require some experimentation. Don't rest on early success or be discouraged by failure. Track what is working and what is not to continuously evolve for the better. Here's a tip. If you have trouble embracing or accepting another's point of view or idea, try this. I am working on understanding your position, but I need some time to reflect on our conversation. Pausing and thinking about your answer is far more important than reacting in the moment. You can also analyze engagement surveys segregated by identity demographics, the same way that we were looking at your representation data. Conduct stay interviews to determine what encourages your employees to stay. Another tip, stay interviews do not substitute ongoing one on ones and engagement with your team. You shouldn't wait for a crisis to solve for what you can solve right now. And then conduct regular pay equity analysis, disaggregated by level, function, and identity demographics. I call these our pay health checks. You don't have to wait till the end of the year to conduct them. Do them on an ongoing basis. If we all took one action, I know I gave you a lot right there, but if we all took one action every week to help build equity in our processes and to support and lift up our colleagues who do not feel that they belong and who actually do not belong to the dominant groups in our workplace, whether it is because of their gender identity, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, caste, age, or other identity marker, I'm confident we could start to see real change. Now, this work is full of challenges and discomfort. I've just laid out a whole lot of things that you're probably thinking you can't do. I'm here to tell you, you can do all of them, just not all at once. Many of us want to change conditions in our workplaces, yet sometimes we're terrified of messing up, saying the wrong thing, or not being able to do enough. It's where many of us often dwell, that paralyzing place where our fears reside, where we numb ourselves into being unwilling to act. Organizations who care about LGBTQ equity need to critically assess whether their culture and processes disadvantage LGBTQ colleagues. Do the LGBTQ colleagues in your workplace feel valued and empowered? Or is June the one month where they are given a platform and a party? And if your organization does have LGBTQ empowerment programming in place, are you taking an intersectional approach to ensure that all LGBTQ, not just the most privileged, can benefit from it? We don't work in a vacuum. In order to balance power dynamics and advance all historically excluded employees in the workplace, everyone needs to be a part of this work. I once texted my friend Bob Alata, Vice President of Global Programs at Mozilla Foundation, with an SOS asking for advice. We had just released our DEI report at Vice, and in our internal announcement, when referencing gains in gender representation, we referred to men and women identifying employees. We were quickly called in by our LGBTQ community group leaders about our uninclusive misstep. Why not also say male identifying? The language is problematic because some employees may identify as female and others may identify as women. As a non binary employee, I feel unseen. Oof, it hurt me to receive that feedback, but I heard it. They were right. Our language missed our intentions, but the harm had been made. When data collection and reporting practices are at odds with a person's identity, the feeling of control and being seen and experienced as valid is lost. I wasn't sure how to respond without causing more harm. After listening to me, Bob said, I wonder about actually not trying to fix this, but live in the beautiful tension of it. Bob's advice bolstered me to create a space for dialogue, learning, and humility. I responded proactively by sharing the feedback with our communications and leadership teams and responding directly to the LGBTQ community group with what we had missed and how we were addressing it going forward. I acknowledged my responsibility in our failure, articulated the sticky points about our data collection efforts, and committed to remaining aware of and responsive to the evolving nature of people's identities. They regained trust in me, and I continue to work to earn that trust every day because they matter. I also want to acknowledge that many of us also live in fear of shedding light on the bias and inequities we face at work because we know it is dangerous to do so. Instead, we give up small parts of ourselves, let our courage shrink, and our voice diminish. I have felt beaten into submission more times than I can count. I have been layered under toxic managers who have taken ownership of my ideas, set up roadblocks for my success, and questioned my value on a daily basis. Even as I fought to bring more seats to the table, I have had to desperately fight to earn and keep mine while watching others face far less hurdles. But I persist. I refuse to settle for a lesser goal. And I know you can too. We all can, together. We have a once in a lifetime opportunity to rethink how we connect and build deeper relationships, make decisions, and create a new, better workplace environment. The stakes are high because if employees don't find the culture, fairness, and connectivity they seek, they are prepared to look elsewhere. Building inclusive and equitable workplaces goes beyond diversifying the gender, racial, and LGBTQ makeup of your team or token monthly celebrations. It requires concrete actions like number one, actively questioning the lack of diverse representation on your teams. Number two, ensuring LGBTQ and others from underrepresented groups have a voice in places and rooms where decisions are made. Number three, reframing the unique and often undervalued skills and capabilities that LGBTQ, women, Black, and other groups of employees bring to the workplace. And number four, recognizing the courage it takes for someone of a different race or identity to raise concerns in the workplace. When you reflect on the power you have, you can begin to see the opportunities you have to create change, to lead your own inclusion revolution. If we all start being the allies we want to be, showing up and for our colleagues, doing the work, we can make lasting and meaningful change for all. we can build workplaces that work for everyone. The time is now to transform our workplaces, to be radically inclusive and equity minded, to put into practices all the tips and tools that I have shared thus far. It can be challenging, frustrating work that takes intentionality and persistence and heart and courage. But the time has never been more right. We can harness our collective power to make lasting and meaningful change. I am counting on you to help realize this as a shared vision. I am counting on you to help realize this as a shared vision. I am here for all of it. Thank you.